Hello everyone, this presentation is on using Google Forms for Universal Design, focusing on assessment.
Teachers can use Google Forms in their classrooms and with their students to help meet the principles of universal design through both formal and informal assessment methods. Examples would be items such as polls, surveys, quizzes and tests, competitions, entrance and exit slips, collaboration activities, data analysis activities, rubrics and project evaluations, almost like classroom response systems, and more. Google Forms can be adapted and modified to assist learners with difficulties with vision, hearing, reading or writing, spelling, conceptual difficulties, attention deficit difficulties, and more. There are three major principles of universal design. The first is providing students with or fostering flexibility and representation, giving students multiple options regarding perception and interpretation, language and symbols, and comprehension. The second is providing students with or fostering multiple means of action and expression. This could be through physical actions, executive skills, and overall communications. And lastly is providing multiple means of engagement for students, minimizing and eliminating barriers that may exist in the classroom. It involves being proactive on the part of the teacher, getting students interested in the subject matter, developing effort and resilience, and developing independence and self-direction within students. All these principles of universal design help all students succeed to the maximum extent possible when utilized properly in the classroom. Before we talk about how Google Forms is great for the concepts of universal design, let's first talk about the basics of Google Forms. Your district needs to have purchased a domain and Google accounts for your staff and students and be using the cloud-based storage in your district. Once you have accounts set up for your faculty, staff, and students, using the full features of Google Forms is very easy. So if I'm in my Google Drive, I go to New, More, Google Forms, and this is how I start to create a new Google Form document. Now up at the top we have 5 options. These options allow for accessibility and collaboration. The first option require the school district login to view this form. That ensures that the user is part of the domain. Automatically collect respondent's username. This would ensure that the person answering is in fact that person. For most assessments, whether formal or informal, you probably want to have that checked, but actually I found that for some of my formal assessments, I don't want to have this checked. It's actually a security issue. Show progress bar at the bottom of the pages, or bottom of page. This is for the students or the person completing the assessment. It allows them to know what their progress is, and when they answer all questions that are required, it would be at 100%. Require only one response per question. This is great for formal assessments. Shuffle question order. Again, this is great for formal assessments for security. If we go to the bottom, show a link to submit another response. This option you would not want to have checked for formal assessments. Publish and show a public link to form results. This would be great for informal assessments such as polls or surveys to allow students to see the responses and the results, and allow responders to edit responses after submitting. Again, great for informal assessments if you want your students to be able to go back and change their answers. Now if you look at an assessment I already made, it's actually a formal assessment. What you see is, and this is a quiz on solving equations, but what you see is I actually have spots where I have students input their name, date, and period. I do this for a few reasons. For one, I think it's a good habit to get into. But for formal assessments, it allows me to keep the assessment secure, because if I collect their username, it actually gives students the option to go back into the quiz, or at least have the link when they're done. So I do that for security for formal assessments. And the period just allows you to organize the results at the end. But let's go back into a blank form. Here's where the concepts of universal design really come into play. So when I'm creating a question, and again, above creating a question, you have the title that you could put and directions or descriptions to help students. but we have many options in the format for the question. We have text, paragraph text, which would be like a short answer, multiple choice, check boxes where they could check the proper answer or answers, choose from a list, very similar to check boxes, a scale, they could rank things from 1 to 5, great for, or even higher, but great for informal assessments such as surveys. A grid would be a table where they'd select their response from a table, and then also date and time where they could select the proper date that would apply to a question or the proper time, such as date would be something like when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So those are your options for creating a question, and these options are great for many different areas. So for example, if I go back to an assessment I already made, this is an assessment on solving equations we talked about already. But if I go to File and make a copy, I could change this quiz if I rename it something different so I know. I could change this quiz to allow for different modifications. So what I mean by that is if I have a student where I want to limit their answer choices and only give them 3 answer choices, I could easily do that. A great modification. I could also change the question to be a paragraph question where they would have to explain their answer. Now, I might not use this for a one-step equation, but this would be great for a higher level student to explain all the steps or explain their answer after solving a problem. If I go back to the blank form, I could have help text for the question. So this is great for students who have reading difficulties. Maybe you put a short phrase that's easier for students to understand. Great for any type of student, ESL, whatever it may be, but you could put help text there to help students answer the question properly. And then other options for creating a question, there's advanced settings depending upon the option you choose up here. So for example, shuffle option order would be great to keep your formal assessment secure. And then also required question, most times you want to have this checked. There are certain situations you might not, such as you might give a formal assessment where you give students the option to answer 7 out of 10 questions. Or it might be for an informal assessment where you don't mind whether the students don't answer certain questions. Going back to the example I already have done, I used an add-on called GMath for Forms to create a lot of the math type, not for the first couple of questions here, but there's an example. So this is important because a concept of universal design is making it accessible and easy to understand for all learners. So if this math type wasn't correct, certain students may have trouble understanding what that question is asking. You want to make it just like the question you did in class, so that's an important concept of universal design. And by the way, there's many add-ons you could get to help meet certain concepts of universal design. Some of the add-ons do make your life easier as a teacher, but other add-ons are great to help meet the concepts of universal design, and you could explore those add-ons, different add-ons on your own. When creating a forum, in order to make it more appealing and engaging, an important concept of universal design, I could change the theme. This would be great to spice up a formal assessment, but really ideally for informal assessments, based on what type of informal assessment you're doing, you could change that theme to make it more appealing and more engaging. Also, you notice that when you change the theme, a lot of times it changes the color for questions. This would be great for students with certain types of color blindness. So you could play around with that to assist your students, again, to make it more engaging or for certain needs in your classroom. If you're having students create their own informal or formal assessment using Google Forms, if they're working on it together, the option in File, which would be Add Collaborators or Email Collaborators, is great to allow students to work together efficiently and effectively. That's a great idea to meet the concepts of universal design, differentiation, and appealing to all learners is to, again, create their own usable formal or informal assessment. So now let's discuss meeting the needs of unique learners. One of them is, I actually have it right now, is that this form is zoomed in. One of the options in the Google browser is I could zoom in or out. So if I would go to viewing a live form, let's say, the student or person taking the assessment could easily make it larger or smaller, which is great for students who have vision difficulties, maybe students who have attention deficit difficulties so they could focus on one specific question or two specific questions at a time. Again, a great thing to help students with unique needs. Additionally, another add-on you can install is this Read Write app that you see up here for Google Chrome. This is fantastic to assist students with reading or writing difficulties because what it does, it actually reads the questions for them. Not go through this all the way for sake of time, but when you use that app, you could change the speed at which the question is read to students. So a fantastic app for students, again, with reading or writing difficulties, students maybe ESL or ELL, students with dyslexia. Really excellent tool to meet their needs. So for collaboration purposes and to quickly share results with students, there are many really cool and important features of Google Forms. First, when your responders or students respond, all the responses appear in one place. So if I go to View Responses, they all appear in one spreadsheet. Now, the responses are time-stamped, so if you record the start time, you could actually see how long it took each responder or student to complete the formal or informal assessment. Now, I have columns for name, date, and period with the name darkened out for the purposes of this video, but you can see all the responses appear here. So since all the responses are in one place, it allows you to, as a teacher, to grade them very quickly and then share that feedback very quickly, such as the next day, and even for small assessments, sometimes even in the same class period. Now there's an add-on once you're in the spreadsheet called Flubaroo, and this also grades the assignments automatically. So it's great for multiple choice assessments, whether formal or informal. It actually also works for short answer, although there are some things you have to be very careful with for short answer. But here's where you see that grades portion. This is made using Flubaroo, but it actually gives you the percent once you choose the point values for each question, and you can see exactly, again, in an organized manner how each responder did. So perfect, again, to provide students with timely feedback that can be used effectively based on your students or for individual students. Now, if I go back into the quiz I have made and I go to responses, summary of responses, a page appears, and I won't click on that because what happens when the page opens, it actually shows the responders at the top. But when the page opens, it opens to a circle graph of each question that shows you statistically how each of the responders did in terms of, like, for number one, we see that 36 people out of 39 chose -3, which is the correct answer. So again, this is valuable to share with the entire class or group of students so you could show how they did, or you could even show the class the question that the most students got wrong. Great for the entire class or great for individual students. And once in a while, you'll actually find as a teacher, once in a blue moon, maybe you make a mistake on a question and have to give students a free question. That would never happen to me. But, you know, if you could tell by the statistical analysis that sometimes maybe you made an error. But this would also be great for polls or surveys to share the results right away with your students. These analytics are great. This data is fantastic, can be used for many different purposes, or you could go back to your spreadsheet and you can make different data from this. Again, great for data analysis or for different types of activities and further statistical analysis.
Now, let's hear from the Supervisor of Instructional Technology for the Penn-Arlington Area School District, Laura Stefani, regarding the use of Google Forms to meet the principles of universal design.
UDL and Google Forms go perfectly together, especially in assessment methods, both formal and informal. I look at it in a couple different ways. First of all, how it's presented on the part of the teacher through surveys, online forms, quizzes, collaborative, bookmarking, rubrics, note-taking, journaling, the students being able to ask questions of the teacher and the teacher being able to respond through commenting and other methods, through data and through almost like a classroom response system. The other side of that is how the student engages in the learning experience. They have the opportunity to respond They can make their text size larger or smaller as they need it. They have the availability to have online readers. They can highlight text. They, again, can ask questions of their teachers and their classmates. And most importantly, it allows them to be creating, collaborating, and communicating, making their learning experience much more engaging.
Now let's discuss the advantages and disadvantages in using Google Forms for assessments to meet the needs of universal design. First, the advantages. Assessments made using Google Forms can be accessed from anywhere an internet connection is present. This is great for students who are absent from school or away from school for an extended period of time for any reason. Probably the biggest advantage is that Google Forms provides accessibility to all different types of learners and to meet all different types of needs, as discussed throughout the video. Students with reading and writing difficulties, students with dyslexia, ESL students. Google Forms provides accessibility and allows these students to complete all these different types of assessments. And lastly, for an advantage, Google Forms naturally fosters and promotes collaboration based on the functionality and the ways it can be used with your students in the classroom. For disadvantages, Google Forms does rely on an internet connection and cloud-based storage. So for example, if your school is having an issue with the network that day, you might not be able to use Google Forms for that class period or for that day based on the issue. Students who are not well versed in technology may have difficulty taking online assessments using Google Forms, or especially have difficulty with creating their own assessments. Security for formal assessments is a minor issue with Google Forms. You do have to take measures to ensure assessments are secure. There are many features of Google Forms that provide security. Students could take a screenshot of the formal assessment, so it's important that you do your job as the classroom teacher, such as sitting in the back of the room and having students turn up their brightness on their screens all the way, so you could view student screens at all times and explain the rules and expectations very clearly and the consequences for violating any of those rules. Students who have difficulty in typing may need to use another assistive technology device in junction with Google Forms. And you must take the time to show students the features and the functionality of Google Forms. Don't assume that students know these features or assume they know. You must take class time or work with students individually to show students the full features that can assist them and allow them to complete assessments effectively.
Thank you for watching this video on how using Google Forms could help meet the principles of universal design through assessment. Technology is not the only way to help meet the principles of universal design, but as you can see from this video, using Google Forms is very, very effective to do so. The principles of universal design are all about engaging all learners, giving flexibility of representation, giving students multiple options and multiple ways to succeed. If you have any questions, please consult my resources at the end of this video on universal design, or use the help feature in Google Forms regarding the functionality. Again, thank you very much.